So, I hope this video is worthwhile because it's been a few days in the making just to get to this pre-recording phase. It's definitely perhaps one of the more in-depth ones that I've looked at. And to be honest, I don't know how long it's going to go, but I'll try not to make it too painfully long. So, a few people mentioned to me that they'd be interested in hearing my take on the Soto Sigh, wanted me to do a video that specifically addressed the Soto Sigh. We all know the Soto Sigh. That's Jenn's sigh that she so frequently lets out during interviews. And it's come up quite often. So what I've done for this video is that I have gone through the majority of Jenn's interviews and pulled out all the clips where we get the Soto Sigh, so that we can have a look and see if it actually tells us anything about what's going on. Now, I have actually left out looking at the derivative use interview because, well, for starters, there's so many clips in here already, but I also thought that it may be something that people may be interested in looking at themselves after this video to see what they think in terms of the Soto Sigh in that particular video. I'm more than happy to do a follow-up with that video looking at the Soto Sigh, or perhaps even more so, I do plan on looking at the instances when she's whispering, or pretty much whispering in her interviews, and looking at those instances and examining that. So perhaps I may, after I've done that, go to the derivative use interview and look at the combination of the Soto Sigh and the Soto Whisper and see what we can get from looking at that. But for this one, I've got clips from pretty much every other interview, and we'll delve in and try and figure out what's going on here. Now, I'm going to start by talking about the psychology behind these kinds of sighs, just so we know what it is we're looking at and what sort of things could be indicated by these sighs that Jenn is making. Now, one interesting thing that is worthy of note is that you can quite often hear these sighs more frequently from people who struggle with PTSD, people who struggle with anxiety, all those sort of anxious issues, which makes sense when we delve into what's going on mentally when someone is making one of these sighs. So I've just put together a checklist which I'll go through first, and then we'll launch into the actual video. So given the frequency of the Soto Sigh, I wanted to just make sure that I had it clear in my head first before I jumped into this video and talked about my assessment of what was going on. So I've looked at a number of research papers, and there are plenty of research papers, lots of information about the psychology behind those kinds of sighs. So I've basically tried to condense it down into very, very brief description. Okay, I'll try this again. I've just recorded this 2 times and it's come out blank with no recording. So let's go again. So what does a sigh mean in terms of interrogations and interviews. Quite often it will mean it's a way of giving themselves temporary relief from anxiety or distress. Quite often that will be when a person's being anxious, because of course when you are telling the truth you tend to become less distressed, less anxious. You've got nothing to hide. Yeah, if you're turning around and saying that you've done something truly hideous, then there may be distress from that. So obviously, when you hear someone giving a sigh when they are in an interview, then it's worth listening carefully to what it is they are saying next and questioning, is it because they're just suddenly admitting to something really horrible that they've done, or could it be because they are trying to be a little bit evasive? Sighs can also signify those emotional transitions. So if someone is saying something truthful and they're going to be calm about that, they're telling the truth, and then they need to add something into their narrative, their story, that is probably less than truthful, and their anxiety levels are going to go up. That's when you're going to hear a sigh. Or when they're thinking about something that has occurred and something that is causing them. So they're thinking back on something that they've witnessed, they've experienced, and they're about to continue their story, then you may hear that sigh also. More often than not, when someone gives a big sigh like those Soto Sighs, it tends to signify negative emotions or thoughts, not happy, chirpy thoughts. So the anxiety, the stress. It may also indicate disdain for the person they are talking to, or for the topic. They may not be impressed with the topic, so they'll give a sigh, just to let you know. Most important thing to keep in mind though is when you hear someone let out a massive sigh like Jenn does, it may indicate that they're about to give a deceptive answer, because sighs like that can be a signal that they're really stopping to think about what they have to say. When do you have to stop and think about what you have to say? You do that when you're about to be deceptive. Because if you're telling the truth, you generally don't need to think about it. It doesn't take much effort to come out with the truth. So with these things in mind, let's have a look at these clips and see what is perhaps going on here with Jenn.
Can you tell me when is the last time you were with someone?
Saw her, I'm gonna say Sunday night.
Okay.
I heard her Monday getting ready for school.
So you last saw her Sunday night about what time?
I'm gonna say 11 p.m.
Now, straight off the bat, if you've been following my videos for a while, there's one I recently did where I discussed my thoughts on whether or not Jenn saw Maddie on the Sunday night, because she's so vague about details. And for that half-hour period of time when she supposedly sees Maddie, she gives about 5 or 6 different things that occur. And like I said in that video, she'd have to be able to exist in 2 parallel universes at a time to achieve that. There's also the slip up when at one point asked when she last saw Maddie and she said Wednesday. Could have just been a slip up, but there's nothing concrete in anything that she says about the Sunday night that could lead you to believe that she did see Maddie on Sunday night. So it's really interesting that when they ask her the last time she saw Maddie, straight up, get a pause, we get the Soto Sigh. She wants them to believe that the last time she saw Maddie was Sunday night. But is she telling the truth there?
Okay. Did you hear around 7 or 8?
I heard noises in the kitchen, but I'm not sure,
Not sure who it was exactly.
Who it was exactly, yeah.
Gotcha.
It could have been any of the roommates.
But you didn't see her leave Monday morning. Were you still in bed or still in your room?
I was still asleep, yeah.
Gotcha.
So here we have the detective asking her, did you hear Maddie on Monday morning? Huge pause, and then we get the Soto Sigh. And when you consider that eventually she admits that she probably didn't even hear Maddie, we know what's going on here. She doesn't want to basically indicate the fact that she couldn't even be bothered getting her ass out of bed on the Monday morning to say goodbye to her daughter before school. Or, if that's not the case, she doesn't want to admit to the fact that she already knew that her daughter was deceased, so chose not to get out of bed because that was a convenient alibi.
And what time did you get back home for the day?
Let me check something. I want to check what time my blood work appointment is at. I'll give you more of an accurate time.
Yeah.
Now, I have included all the clips where I encountered the Soto Sigh because I wanted to see all the sorts of instances when it may occur. In this instance, there was a really, really long pause that I cut out from there after the sigh while she actually looked up the time for her appointment. So in this instance, I actually think the sigh was more about contemplation. She was trying to figure out what time she actually got home that particular day. And in order to do so, she then had to check in her phone to figure out her appointment times so she could figure out roughly when it was that she got back to the apartment. So I think in this instance, that's all we're looking at. Nothing hugely deceptive, except that here's one part of her narrative that she's consistently lied, because she consistently tells detectives that Stefan was there when she got home. So I don't know if maybe that is there at the back of her mind also, that for some reason she has to establish that part of the narrative and she's focusing on that. But I suspect it is more a case of her not being certain of the time and needing to look it up.
Okay, so my appointment was at 10:15 and it took them 45 minutes to see me. So I didn't get home until 11:15, 11:30.
I think it's also worth noticing that in this instance, when she is talking about this appointment, her sigh is less pronounced. So after the initial sigh of she doesn't know what time, then she's doing the mental arithmetic in her head, trying to figure out, well, if the appointment was meant to be this time, I had to wait, I think I finished around this time, I must have got home here. Then the sigh is probably simply signalling that. Like I said, it is far less pronounced, so I think we can just not worry about the sigh with relation to when she got home. I think it really was just mental calculations and possibly not anything hugely deceptive.
Now, your roommates, I know you told me their names earlier. Are you okay? Do you have to use the bathroom?
No, I'm just anxious.
Oh, okay.
Now that sigh was barely audible, but there was a definite sigh there, and he picked up on it. Because he asked her, do you need to use the bathroom? She said, no, I'm just anxious. And yet, that occurred when asked who her roommates were. That's not a difficult question. It's not a question that you can lie about. She knows their names, so it's easy information to give. So why would she be anxious there? I suspect that she realises that if questioned, her roommates are possibly going to have information that's going to shine a bad light on her and Stefan. So I suspect that she didn't really want them questioning her roommates, so that sigh, while not overly pronounced, did show anxiety, because in her mind she was probably thinking she didn't want them to talk to the roommates, so she didn't want to have to give them information about the roommates.
As far as her mental diagnosis, she's diagnosed with ADHD. How long has she had ADHD?
Since she was like 5, 6. They also diagnosed her at the same time with autism. So she's had an autism diagnosis for a few years now. I've reassessed her recently. They told me she had some autistic traits, but they weren't sure if she was autistic.
So they ask her about Maddie's medical diagnosis, and she has a huge Soto Sigh before she starts talking about Maddie's ADHD. I found that really interesting. Now, I will say that as someone who does have ADHD, there is definitely still a lot of stigma associated with ADHD, and particularly for children, because quite often when someone says their child has ADHD, there are still people who turn around and look at that as signs of you just don't know how to teach your kid how to behave, or that makes your child a naughty child, which it isn't, but that stigma exists. So it is possible that Jenn could be simply reacting to that sort of stigma. But something that I find significant here is he asks her when that diagnosis was made, and she says when Maddie was about 5 or 6. You do the math. We've been told that Jenn and Stefan were together for roughly 7 years. Maddie's just turned 13. So Maddie would have been around 6 when Stefan came into her lives. Was this diagnosis something that occurred after Stefan came into their lives? And did Jenn perhaps see a change in Maddie's behaviour at that time, which led her to take Maddie to a paediatrician and led her down the road of getting a diagnosis of ADHD? Because that could be telling us a whole other story about Maddie. That could be indicating that Maddie actually never had ADHD, because trauma can sometimes present, or will often present, with very similar symptoms to that of ADHD. So perhaps the big sigh there from Jenn is that she realises there is some connection there between Maddie's ADHD diagnosis, or the onset of symptoms, and Stefan coming into their lives. Maybe, maybe not, but something to keep in mind. But also, definitely, there's also the possibility that this is a reaction to public stigma around ADHD.
I think if I heard you right the first time, you got home at 11 and you and Stefan were both here, and then he left to go to the vape store again?
I did see him, yeah.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure I had that, because, like I said, sometimes you forget to write things down.
So I guess I would refer to that one as a semi-Soto Sigh, because it wasn't a full-on sigh like we often hear from her, but there was definitely a sigh there. And what happened? Once again, it's the questioning about her coming home at around 11:15. So I think there's actually something significant there. But he says, was Stefan there? And then he left to go to the vape store again. And that's when she does her semi-Soto Sigh and says, I did see him. So she actually, in this instance, doesn't confirm that he was at her home when she got home this time. I think this time she's realised she's made a mistake and she doesn't want to give a direct answer. So instead of saying, yes, he was there, she says she saw him. She doesn't say what time frame. So I actually think that there was definite evasion here, and that the sigh was a quick regroup, basically. But I do find it interesting that this is the second time now when discussing the timeline and discussing the timeline around that 11:15 time that she's let out a sigh. Now we know that she continues in her interviews to push the notion that Stefan was there when she got home. But each time they question her first, she doesn't just, or I think each time, she doesn't volunteer that information. She has to be asked. So I think there is a bit of deception behind that little semi-Soto sigh. But definitely it's interesting that it's occurring basically discussing exactly the same topic.
You have a new job, and last night you asked them to go sleep upstairs because you wanted to get rest. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What time was this? Do you remember? It doesn't have to be like exact time, but like just...
Now, bearing in mind, she's had a chance to practice this story of hers a number of times already. And yet, once again, we get to the question of Sunday night. Simple question of, what time did you send them upstairs to bed together? She's given this answer previously. And yet, she still comes out with the Soto sigh and a big pause. Why is it an issue? Why is she suddenly anxious? And I think we can agree that in this instance, she was anxious about something. Is it because of the fact that she did send them up to bed together? Or is it because she didn't see Maddie on Sunday night? Either way, there's definitely a tell here in this Soto sigh when they're discussing Sunday night and her supposedly sending them up to bed together.
Okay, what time did you wake up? I'm going to say around 8 o'clock in the morning. Stefan came into the room and was trying to put the leash on the dog.
Wow, you could just about knock someone over with that sigh. So, what time did you wake up that morning? Pause, and then the biggest sigh ever. I'm going to say around 8 a.m. She's so ultra vague about this particular part of her story. She claims Stefan came in and put the lead on the dog, but she changes times frequently. Around 8 a.m, between 8 and 8:15, doesn't really know. But I can't help wondering if there's a bit more to it than just her not being certain of the time. Because remember, we never heard this part of the story from Stefan. We only heard it from her. And when she said it in this instance, it sounded like someone basically reciting a well-rehearsed speech. Is she truly visualizing events that have occurred? Or is this just her story that she now has down pat, and the reason for the sigh was because she needed to reset and figure out which page she was on for the story, where she was going to read on from, essentially. Don't know, but it's just a really interesting time for her to be chucking in a massive sigh.
Okay, did Stefan have access to the phone? I'm sorry, I took my medicine, so I feel a little species. I think I've had it with me. I think it's been with me.
So, definitely a shout out to those people who said, how about having a look at the Soto Sigh? Because this is something quite interesting, possibly significant, that I have completely overlooked multiple times, and I may not have caught it, except that I was listening out for the sighs. She's been asked, did Stefan have access to Maddie's phone? She doesn't want to answer that question. You get a Soto sigh, massive sigh, and then she blames her medications. She doesn't know what's going on because of her medications, which is a classic way of stalling, getting out of answering questions. And then she comes out with, I think I've had it with me. I think it's been with me. Twice. Not a definitive, no, it's been with me the whole time. But twice, I think I've had it with me. I think it's been with me. When someone says they think something is the case, generally that's deception. They're basically not telling the full story there. So I actually suspect that Stefan had access to Maddie's phone, and I wouldn't be surprised if amongst those records that have not been released is information about him deleting things from Maddie's phone, removing conversations, maybe even removing images. Because Jenn has essentially told us here that Stefan did have access to Maddie's phone. And the fact that there was that level of distress over answering, the massive sigh, then blaming it on the meds, she was doing her best to put off answering. So to me, that actually suggests this is significant and that Stefan probably did remove things from Maddie's phone. Now don't forget that probably doesn't matter that much, because when they downloaded Maddie's phone, they would have got stuff that had been deleted.
Real quick, I don't remember if Detective Tagler asked, but yesterday when you guys were out looking, do you remember what time you were out looking till?
So yesterday, I stayed in the office. My family went out searching.
Okay, well, I think that one is self-explanatory. She did not want to answer that at all because she knows it makes her look like a bad mother to have to admit that she never went out searching for her daughter at any point in time. You note also that there was an thrown in there. Stalling tactic because she does not want to answer the question. So I think that one, like I said, self-explanatory. The sigh was because she was going to have to admit that she hadn't been out searching for her own daughter.
You stayed until what time?
I'm going to say somewhere between 8 and 9 o'clock. I left and then I came home.
You came straight here?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't clip that one overly well, did I? He was asking her what time she stayed at her mother's office till. And she gets the sigh happening yet again. And then she says that she left somewhere between 8 or 9 o'clock and then came here, as in came home. And we know from the documents that have been released that, according to their records, Jenn returned to the townhouse at around 6 p.m, something which she has been very careful to avoid mentioning. And even when asked, did you return to the townhouse, she says no. So I think that's what's going on here. This sigh is basically, she's leaving out part of the truth. Sure, her and Stefan returned to the apartment after law enforcement had finished questioning them about Maddie being missing. But before law enforcement arrived at her mother's office, Jenn had returned to her apartment.
Alright, so he is on medication. You told me he's on medication for insomnia?
Insomnia.
Can you say that right? Sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And then I believe you said ADHD.
Yeah, and also anxiety meds, I think.
Anxiety, okay. Anything else that you can think of?
He did have, I think, a vial of, I'm not sure it was Viagra or Cialis, but one or the other.
So she lets out a sigh here before saying that Stefan had a vial of either Viagra or Cialis. Well, let's think about this. Jenn is telling her that her and Stefan have been broken up since June or July of the previous year. And he has come back up to apparently help her with the dog. Now, we've not heard her say anything about friends with benefits. In fact, she has admitted that because of her medications, she has no drive or no interest in sexual relations. So, why would he need a vial of Viagra? Well, not because of Jenn. The fact that she lets out a big sigh before she says that he has that on him, I find that really disturbing. Because we're not being told that he has any other partners at that point in time. So why is it a cause of stress for Jenn to admit that he's got it? Think about that, just let that sit for a moment. That is really disturbing, and that could well show guilty knowledge on Jenn's part.
Alright, now Maddie, what medication did she take?
She was on and anxiety medication. So that because she suffers from really bad GI issues, she's constantly constipated. What else? She had an asthma inhaler. She had an asthma inhaler.
That damn asthma inhaler keeps coming up, and to me that is truly disturbing. There's definitely something going on here. She says in quite a normal tone she had an asthma inhaler. Then she mumbles it super quietly. You get this Soto Sigh, and in this case it is signalling an emotional transition, because you can hear the change in her emotions when she says for the third time she had an asthma inhaler. She's gone from talking somewhat matter-of-factly to sounding somewhat distressed to be talking about an asthma inhaler. The least dangerous of all Maddie's medications. So why is the asthma inhaler so significant to Jenn? Why the massive sigh and the sudden change in emotion?
Does she take that medicine to school with her?
The asthma medication, yes. The asthma medication, yes.
So again, he's questioned her with regards to the sorts of medications that Maddie would take to school with her, and she lets out another massive sigh and comes out again with the asthma medication. Yes, Maddie would normally take the asthma medication to school with her. This is the second instance when talking about the asthma medication has resulted in a reaction from Jenn. A sigh that to me is suggesting an emotional transition in this instance. Because we know it's not being deceptive. Maddie did take her asthma medication to school with her normally. So to me, it's an emotional transition. Something about Maddie's asthma medication is distressing for Jenn. Now, the next clip is still talking about Maddie's medications. Basically, the question was around what meds Maddie took at what times. Let's hear what Jenn's response to that was.
That would be given to her at night. The asthma medication was used, and the GI medication.
Now, again, in this instance, the sigh wasn't as heavily pronounced, but it was definitely there just before she mentioned Maddie's asthma medication and whenever that was taken. But something also that I'd noticed with that is that she's still talking about Maddie's asthma medication in the past tense. Her asthma medication was given to her, not her asthma medication is given to her as needed, or whatever the answer there was supposed to be. Got to question some of these redactions, honestly. But why is it that when she's talking about Maddie's asthma medication, she's having a emotional reaction, there's the sigh coming in, and she's speaking in the past tense? I truly believe that there is something significant here with regards to Maddie's medication and the way that Maddie died. And I've said this before. What do you use asthma medication for? Well, when someone's having an asthma attack, their airways constrict and they can't get air in to their lungs. Essentially, they can't breathe, and Ventolin basically opens up the airways again so they can breathe. This could be hugely significant that Jenn is having these reactions every time she talks about Maddie's asthma medication.
So I just wanted to keep the clean clothes and dirty clothes separated. So dirty clothes are on the floor right now. What's in the basket should be like half clean, half dirty clothes, I think.
Now, I almost wasn't going to include that one because you hear her inhale significantly before she says and then she exhales. So it's like a sigh but with an in the middle of it. But the thing is, before that big stall, what is she talking about? She's talking about Maddie's laundry basket, her laundry hamper. What's in that laundry hamper? Maddie's birthday dress and Stefan's boxes. Did she actually notice the presence of his boxes in Maddie's laundry hamper and just carefully avoided discussing the topic in all her interviews? Or is she just pausing here for some reason, trying to gather her thoughts? I don't know, but it is definitely interesting to me that after discussing Maddie's clothes and her laundry hamper, that's when she basically grinds to a halt momentarily, and you get that major inhale, the and then the exhale. There's definitely some sort of transitioning there, emotional transitioning, who knows.
What did you guys talk about when you got home?
What happened this morning?
What did you say? What happened this morning?
He's like, we had a good morning. We made really good time. Maddie got ready super quick. We were out the door super quickly.
Now, I don't think that was coincidental. He asks her what happened this morning. There is a really quick intake of breath before what happened this morning. And then, when he pulls her up on that and asks her, what do you mean by what happened this morning? We get the Soto Sigh. And then she just goes on with the well-rehearsed story that we've heard multiple times. But the fact that she had to pause, she had to take that big intake of breath before saying what happened this morning, and then when questioned about it, she sighed. I can't help thinking that she's not talking about a trip to Macca's in terms of what happened that morning.
Alright, now that you mentioned phones, so Maddie had a phone.
Yeah.
And explain to me what her attachment is to her phone.
Her phone is her lifeline. That's how she talks to all of her friends. That's how she talks to any of us. She's constantly on video chat with her best friend, or talking to them, or playing video games with them. But she's on her phone pretty often.
Now, the conversation here is about Maddie and her relationship with her phone, essentially. And we know from the interview when they just completely nailed Jenn's ass to the wall that Maddie actually didn't make a habit of forgetting her phone. So when they've asked her the significance of Maddie's phone to her, we get this massive Soto Sigh happening again. And she does essentially, in all that long spiel that she gives, tell the detectives that Maddie is pretty much permanently attached to her phone. If you listen to what she's saying, that is pretty much what she's saying. She is saying that Maddie's phone is her lifeline. Maddie uses her phone for all these things. It's super, super important to her. Subconsciously, Jenn is telling the detectives Maddie would never leave her phone, or would not usually leave her phone at home like that. So either Jenn knew that there was something wrong because of Maddie's phone being at home, or she knew that Maddie's phone was at home because Maddie never went to school. I truly believe when you listen to the sigh, the lead-in, and then the big spiel that she gave about the significance of Maddie's phone, when we know that at a later date detectives nail her over this whole thing, I think that Jenn definitely knew something. Either she knew something was wrong, but she was protecting Stefan, or she knew exactly what was wrong and was protecting Stefan.
And then before that, I've been unemployed. I've been living off disability, essentially. I'm disabled.
Okay, why are you disabled? From what?
I have a bunch of things. Primarily PTSD.
Now, I do need to be really, really careful here. I don't want to be the person that turns around and says that someone who has a hidden disability doesn't have a disability. What do I mean by that? There are so many people out there who do struggle day to day with anxiety, with PTSD, to the point where perhaps they can't leave their house easily, where they spend most of their lives at home because going out into public areas causes them extreme anxiety. So I don't want to sound like someone who's saying that that sort of thing does not exist. But at the same time, Jenn has a disability parking permit as well. What's that for? Because she seems to walk pretty fine to me. Now, like I said, I want to be cautious about this, but when he asks her about her disabilities, she lets out a huge sigh. Could it be that maybe she's been told by multiple people that you don't have a disability, you don't appear disabled, and maybe she truly does struggle with PTSD and anxiety? Or could it be that she's a grifter and she's about to come out with a very long list of things? PTSD, anxiety, who knows what else? Because she got interrupted when they asked her about the PTSD. But I'm just going to leave it at that, because like I said, it is a real struggle for people who do have those hidden disabilities when people accuse them of not having disabilities.
And then, did he tell you where he went after that?
He said he drove around for a little bit, killing time, and then...
Killing time for what?
For the vape shop to open.
Okay.
And then I think he told me he waited... No, he told me he waited in front of the vape shop for it to open.
Now, earlier, when they were asking her about that period of time after she got back from her appointment, and she was talking about Stefan being there and then heading out to the vape shop or whatever it was. Either way, whatever it was, at that point in time, there was one of the Soto Sighs just before talking about the vape shop. And here again, they're asking her where he's been, what he said he was doing, and as soon as the vape shop comes up again, she lets out a sigh. Now, I think we can be pretty confident that him going to the vape shop was an attempt at creating an alibi. Being seen at the vape shop buying more vape stuff, being caught on camera, even to the point where Jenn is so very helpful. Do you want to know the name of the vape shop? I can tell you exactly where it is. I can tell you exactly which one he goes to, so that you can check camera footage. Now, the other interesting thing here is that when they're saying that he initially went to the vape shop and it was closed, and that's when he was just driving around killing time, that is the time when he went into that parking garage and transferred Maddie into the boot of his car, the trunk of his car. So I do find it interesting that when she's talking about the vape shop and him going there and it being closed, that you get the Soto Sigh. It makes me wonder.
I can't tell what he's holding. I don't know if it's a plastic bag full of stuff or...
Inside of that bag is Maddie's backpack, Maddie's school computer, and one of her Crocs.
Are you telling me we're looking for a body right now?
Now you have two sighs in a very short space of time. The first one wasn't quite as significant as the first one, but this is when they're telling her what they found in the dumpster. And you get two sighs from her, and she says, "Are you telling me you're looking for a body right now?" I just want to say, for her referring to her daughter as a body, makes me truly hate that woman. That is so cold. What parent is going to say that? I'm sorry, but it is not what you would expect a mother to say. So in terms of the backpack, it could be her trying to control shock, emotion, that she's just been essentially told that her ex-boyfriend threw out her daughter's backpack with all these things in it. Could also be her trying to figure out where to go with the narrative at that point, if she knows what's going on and she doesn't want to give away the fact that she knows. That comment, "Are you telling me we're looking for a body right now?" is disturbing on so many levels. What parent says that? I don't know what to think in this instance with those two sighs. I sort of know what to think, but I'm not sure if I should be saying it, because I don't want to be too critical of Jenn. But at the same time, I can't help wondering if she is basically trying to figure out how to respond to that without sounding guilty, without sounding like she has guilty knowledge. But to say, "Are you telling me we're looking for a body right now?" says to me that she's known for quite some time that they were looking for a body. Don't quote me on that, I feel like I could be being a bit harsh there, but that whole conversation there really does not sit well with me at all.
When you say she doesn't make good grades, what's considered not making good grades?
C under, C, D, F. She's got an IEP. She struggles with, she's got a few learning disabilities with reading, with mathematics. Her ADHD doesn't help anything at all. She's very spacey, very, like, she could see a squirrel and completely forget, like, the teachers have told me, like, they'll tell her to do her work and she'll be like, oh, okay, and then see something, completely get sidetracked and then forget. And they're always on top of her. But, yeah, she's just, I forgot where I was going with this, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Her grades and attendance.
Oh, yeah. Her grades suffer because of her ADHD for sure. That's one of the biggest reasons she got an IEP, is because she's technically 2 years behind with her reading level.
Okay, that right there is so telling, and it breaks my heart. If you think I'm interpreting this wrong, please let me know. But it sounds to me like Jenn is not accepting at all of how Maddie is doing at school. Jenn sounds like she is disappointed because in her eyes her daughter is failing at school. You got 4 significant sighs throughout that whole conversation. Maddie's achievements at school weren't achievements to Jenn. And when a parent sees that in their child, even if they don't verbalise it, the child always senses that. They know. If a parent thinks their child is a failure, the child will pick up on that. And it honestly sounds to me, from the way Jenn was talking about Maddie there, from the multiple sighs, that she was disappointed with Maddie. I don't know if she was embarrassed by Maddie's lack of success at school, or just disappointed, but I'm pretty certain that she was not accepting of Maddie's struggles, and that perhaps some of those arguments that frequently occurred between Jenn and Maddie were perhaps Jenn getting into Maddie about her lack of success at school. And that's so heartbreaking if that is the case, because for a child that struggles with ADHD, by the time a child is 10, an ADHD child is 10, they have received something like 10,000 more negative comments than a child who does not have ADHD. A child who has ADHD goes through their life being constantly told, you don't pay attention, you don't try hard enough, you don't do this, you don't do that. They are basically on a daily basis given a multitude of negative comments about them. And if they are not recognised for the struggle that they go through that impacts on them so much. They see themselves as a failure. And for an ADHD child, they need their parent to believe in them. They need someone to believe in them. If a child with ADHD has someone who believes in them, they can succeed. And it sounds like Jenn did not believe in Maddie at all. And a large portion of the reason why she was struggling so much at school was because if her mother didn't even believe in her, how could she believe in herself? And it truly sounds to me from the way Jenn was talking that she did not believe in Maddie. That she was disappointed, perhaps embarrassed. Now, I could talk about that all day, but we probably need to move on with the other clips. So let me know if you do want me to do another video just talking about the impacts on a day-to-day basis of ADHD for a child like Maddie.
Has she had any changes in her behavior in the past few years?
I'll say yes. But it was all around where puberty hit, and like the typical teenage, the attitude, the sass, the talking back, the disrespect, the pushing boundaries. She was very much doing that. But that calmed down over the last few months. It got even better when Stefan moved out and went to Northport. Maddie and I were actually seeing a therapist together to try to like work through our issues because we were having problems communicating. So, yeah.
Okay, can we label that one a self-centered sigh? Because basically, he was asking about changes in Maddie's behaviour, Maddie's attitude, and Jenn comes out with so much negativity again about Maddie, and then talks about them seeing a counsellor because of their relationship, and lets out a big sigh. That was all about Jenn. That was about the effect that it has on Jenn, not about wanting to support her daughter, but wanting to make sure that her daughter is being nice to her. Because that's how a narcissist thinks. And I think that's why we get that sigh at that particular point in time.
And if you were to leave from Kissimmee, what way would I go to get to Northport or Port Charlotte?
I-4 down to 75 to exit 179, I think, Toledo Blade Road.
Okay, I don't think that is overly significant. I think that's just Jenn basically trying to wrap her head around the instructions for how to get there. The sigh is more about pausing to think, because she has to think about it. It's not something that she does every day, so she has to stop and think first.
I feel like so stupid because I don't know how long he's probably been lying to me about the stupidest shit for the longest time. Like,
So this is one of those little explosions that Jenn has when they're basically showing her all the stuff that Stefan's been up to. And now she's like, well, he's probably been lying to me for the longest time. And you get the Soto Sigh thrown in for emphasis. Question is this because she's angry with him and she's showing her disdain at Stefan because she's never realised before that he's lied to her? Or is this put in for emphasis to try and make what she said sound convincing? Could be either or. I'd love to know which you think it is. Okay, so rather than putting in a really, really long clip for the next clip, I'll just explain. They're asking her about when they were in the hotel and when Stefan left and went to Northport. So that's this next clip that's coming up.
And you said you went to bed around what time?
3:30, 4 o'clock.
100%.
He waited for me to fall asleep, and he fucking left.
Okay, I get that part. Are you 100% that you went to sleep around that time?
Oh, that's what you're asking me. I thought you were confirming me like 100% that's what he's doing.
Okay, so here she is sighing over Stefan waiting for her to go to sleep and then leaving to go down to Kissimmee. Yep, that could sound like a fair enough reason to sigh, showing that she's really annoyed with him for being somewhat deceptive and sneaking out while she was asleep. Here's the thing though. As soon as the detective redirects her, her demeanour completely changes. And she's like, oh, you were asking about being 100% certain that I went to sleep that time. So, to me, the sudden change in demeanour, accompanied by the sigh, I think that sigh was basically to try and emphasise a load of BS. I honestly believe that she knew that he went down to Northport. She has given so many instances in her interviews where it seems pretty clear that she actually is a light sleeper. And I can't see her sharing a bed with him in the hotel and not waking up when he got up and exited and went down to Northport. And there's a few other things there as well, which I've discussed in another video. But just to me, in this instance, the very sudden change in demeanour is like they've suddenly turned off that act that she was doing. It's like, oh, hang on, okay, we're not doing that act right now. We're actually talking about whether I fell asleep at that particular time, not about me being upset about him going down to Northport. So I'm going to just completely turn around and just be all calm now. That's just not what I would expect in terms of natural behaviour. But by all means, if you think that I'm a little bit off with that, let me know. I'm certainly no expert on these things. I'm just saying it how I see it.
So do you know her regular
Cycle? I usually put it, she usually tells me when she gets it, and we put it in an app.
Mm-hmm.
I must have missed it this month, or she must have not told me this month when she got it, but I have it written down when she got it back in January.
When should she have had it this month, roughly?
The beginning of the month. She got it January 1st.
Now, he's asked her when Maddie should have had her period. And she has a massive Soto Sigh. But it's not one where there's a huge pause. She knows the answer. She's not sighing to do mental calculation because she gives the answer instantaneously. She says it should have been at the start of February. So to me, it's not a sigh about trying to access in her brain, do the calculations. It's about something else. Is it because she's suddenly realising that Maddie didn't have her period at the beginning of February? Or is it something else? but I think there's definitely some sort of emotional connection here, talking about Maddie should have had her period at the start of February.
As far as like certain products she might use.
Yeah, her pads.
Mm-hmm.
The pads she would use. I would get her a box about every 2 cycles or so. Because one box would last her 2 cycles. She would typically complain of her breast hurting, having terrible cramps. But I didn't hear any of that this month.
So we're getting the sigh after Jenn saying that typically she would buy her a box every 2 months. And before she describes the symptoms that Maddie would normally get, and that she hadn't said that she'd had them that month. Now, I know there's some people that love to run with the idea that they believe that Jenn thought Maddie was pregnant, and that's why Maddie died, because Jenn got Stefan to come up and deal with Maddie because she was pregnant. I don't believe that. And listening to what's going on here, it sounds to me that this may not have been something that had occurred to Jenn until this point in time. There is an emotional reaction here over when Maddie should have had her period. That was in the previous clip. In this clip, she's reacting in between talking about normally buying a box of pads for Maddie every 2nd month, and about the symptoms that Maddie gets that she has not reported having. So to me, I suspect that Jenn was coming to the realisation that there was a possibility of Maddie being pregnant, or simply figuring out that Maddie's period must have been very, very late. Perhaps she had missed a period.
Yeah, okay.
But you said she's been consistent every month telling you about her period?
She's been late a few times, and she's told me, or sometimes her period has lasted way longer than normal. I'll call it irregular, because mine was irregular when I was younger too. So
okay, so the sigh here is all around Maddie being irregular, and the sigh occurs before Jenn says, well, mine was irregular too when I was young. Now, can we recognise here that Jenn was quite young when she had Maddie? She would have been about 23 or something. She was unmarried. Sounds like she deliberately got pregnant to trap Tyler, in my opinion. Is she thinking that back to that period of time? Or is she referring to when she was a teenager? Maybe the whole sigh here is just her actually thinking like a parent should think, and actually trying to avoid thinking the worst and thinking of logical explanations. Because no parent would want to think about their child being pregnant to some predator who they had allowed access to with their child. So it would be natural behaviour for a parent to try and think of ways to say, yeah, no, actually it's probably just this. It's probably just that she was irregular. I was like that at her age too. Not that she said at her age. So it could be significant. It may not be significant. maybe there is a little piece of humanity in Jenn, and the sigh is more a sigh of, well, actually, I can feel a little bit relieved because I used to be a regular too when I was younger, and I'm not having to worry about possibility of her being pregnant. Or could it be a sigh of, I need to come up with an excuse right now to make it sound like there couldn't be a possibility of my child being pregnant? I don't know. I'm probably not being very helpful on this point whatsoever. So let's just move on to the next one.
I don't know what you want me to say or do, or just want my daughter back.
I think that one's pretty much self-explanatory. That's a sigh of exasperation. Whether it's because she realises they haven't believed her BS, or whether it's because she's trying to express herself and not being successful. Personally, I'm going to lean towards it, her realising that they don't believe her BS, and she's being honest here, saying that she doesn't know what to do, she doesn't know what they want to hear from her, because they've basically just stomped on her act. Maybe I'm being unfair to Jenn. That's just the way I see it.
Do you double check her medication?
When we give it to her, yeah, I make sure I grab the bottle or she grabs the bottle, but like somebody's got eyes on her, grabbing the pills and taking them. Like, it's a tag team situation. She's not allowed to take them alone. So we just make sure that we gotta watch her, because I don't want her to accidentally grab the wrong bottle and accidentally take Adderall before bed, because that sounds like a terrible idea.
So here the topic is they have to watch her take her meds because she doesn't want her to take the wrong meds. Where's the sigh? We have to watch her. Well, we know Jenn wasn't there when Maddie took her meds on the Sunday night. Is there a bit of leakage here? Jenn knows that something went wrong with Maddie's meds on the Sunday night, and the sigh is an indication that she knows that fact. Why would something as mundane as we have to watch her to make sure she takes the right meds be something to cause a emotional reaction in Jenn? It could simply be referring to those past occasions when Maddie's been given the wrong dose or perhaps the wrong meds. But I think there's definitely something in it.
Okay. Would you say he's pretty familiar with Osceola County? Does he venture off?
No. I know he'll visit he likes to visit gaming shops and like board game shops. Does he drive around aimlessly just to kill? Just to drive? I don't think so. I think he goes out with plans.
Now, I find that really interesting. They want to know if he knows the area. And you get a sigh from Jenn, and then her tone completely changes. And it actually sounds a little bit snarky. Like, how dare you ask me this? No, he doesn't know that area. It's a different tone to what we hear from Jenn. Maybe I'm imagining it, but it really does sound like she's a little bit annoyed with them about asking about does he know that area. And she's trying to establish that no, he does not know that area. That's really interesting when we know that that's where Maddie was found.
What meds? What does she take?
She takes hydroxyzine.
Okay.
Um,
What is it for?
it's for anxiety and for sleep.
Okay.
Now, could she take that by herself, or would he have given that to her?
I think she took it by herself. She got home and she had already taken it.
How do you know that?
That's what he told me.
That's what he told you. Okay.
He was there when you got home? You got home, they were already at the apartment? Okay.
I don't like her taking her meds without somebody visually seeing, watching her, because I don't want her to accidentally grab the wrong pill.
Now again, that wasn't a full-on sigh, but you get this massive intake of breath just before she says, I don't like her taking her meds without someone watching her. This is such a huge issue for her. Why is she reacting to the thought of Maddie taking her meds without someone watching her? Why is she reacting to the possibility of something going wrong with Maddie's meds? I'll just leave that question there for you to consider.
She's comfortable enough to grab the pill bottle, but I'm like, no, I need to watch you take them.
Has there ever been an issue with that in the past where she took too many or took the wrong thing? Or
No.
just like a thought in your mind?
No, just a thought in my mind, just me being hypervigilant. I want to physically watch her take her meds and watch her grab two, take them. I don't ever want there to be an accident of she took too many, or she took, my biggest fear is that she would take Adderall by accident, her daytime meds.
Got it.
Again, we get the sigh after her talking about Maddie's meds and talking about the possibility of Maddie having the wrong meds. This from a woman who supposedly knows nothing about what happened to her daughter. And yet, I can't help thinking that the fact that she keeps having these same reactions over the notion of her daughter possibly taking too many meds or the wrong meds, I can't help thinking there's something in that.
I asked her multiple times if she wanted McDonald's, but she said no. Because that was the plan, was that they were going to stop at McDonald's that morning and go get breakfast.
Okay.
He said that he had gone to the vape shop.
So there's a bit of a pattern popping up here. This time her sigh is bookended with going to Macca's and going to the vape shop. These are two things where we've heard her coming out with the Soto Sigh previously. These are significant to her for some reason. Both the Macca's trip and the vape shop trip. For some reason, every time we get the Soto Sigh.
He tells me he's going to go back out. He's going to stop at a few gaming shops. And then he'll meet me at the house at 2:30 so we can together.
Now, I think it would be really hard there to really figure out what's going on in terms of that sigh, because the sigh was after talking about meeting at the house and going together to pick up Maddie. Could have been a sigh of exasperation because he didn't turn up on time. It could be a sigh over, I went to collect Maddie and she wasn't there, and this is when the whole nightmare began. Could be a sigh over, the whole plan went out the window and I had to do all that bit on my own. Who knows? But definitely, to her, going to pick up Maddie without Stefan was apparently significant. Did his flat tyre mess up a planned alibi where both of them were going to wait at the school for Maddie, to make it look like neither of them had any knowledge of Maddie being missing.
That was all. I was just curious if you had heard the phone when you were trying to call him that day.
I didn't.
So they've established that Stefan's phone was upstairs, and they're basically asking her if she heard it ring when she was trying to call him, and she's like, no, I didn't, and then lets out a sigh. Well, either it's a sigh over the fact that she was trying to call him and he wasn't answering, and she now realises the phone was upstairs, or it's a sigh over, phew, got that over and done with, or it could be a sigh over she didn't actually bother trying to ring him. Don't know. I don't think I can do much more with that one.
So he tells me all that. I get off the phone with him. I'm waiting. I wait for about an hour and 10 minutes. 4:04, the bell rings, and I'm waiting. I'm the first in line. And she doesn't come out.
You were in your car?
I was in my car, in the car line, yeah.
Okay.
At this point, it's been a few minutes. She should have been out by now, because she's usually one of the first kids out. She knows I'm in the front line. And I'm holding up the line behind me.
Okay, well that one, she's basically saying, at this point, huge sigh, and then she's basically telling us the whole story of, you know, it had been a few minutes, Maddie should have come out by now, and she was holding up the car line, so she had to drive away. Which we know is BS. People could have driven around her. She didn't need to drive away. Even if she needed to move, she could have parked. She chose to drive away. So in this instance, that sigh is definitely signalling that there was about to be some Jenn deception coming our way.
Her phone was on her dresser. When I found it, I was like, oh my god, she's putting the phone down. That's great. I brought it with me to the school because I was just gonna yell at her and then just hand it to her so she could have something to do on our way home. 4:10 rolls around and she's still not out, or 4:09, and then at this point I'm feeling the pressure from the cars behind me. I'm like, okay, they're all full, they're all waiting for me to leave and she's not here yet.
Well, we can tell the significance of that sigh there, but not necessarily the meaning. Because the sigh is around giving Maddie her phone to play on the way home. And we know that she wasn't taking Maddie home because Maddie never came out. Whether she knew Maddie wasn't coming out, who knows? But definitely the significance of that sigh was the fact that Maddie wasn't going home at that point in time.
I drove the path she would have walked. I didn't see her. I got to the office. And she goes, no, it's a little too early. And I said, okay. Let me go drive back down and wait along the path she would walk and just wait. And I parked and I waited.
Okay, so the sigh here is about her parking on the route that Maddie may have taken and waiting. Is this just because this is a particularly detailed part of her story? Or is she signalling here that she didn't actually do that? Given that there's a heck of a lot of phone data relating to Jenn that hasn't been released, I know I looked at the phone data for that period of time, and because her mother's office was so close to the school, it's really hard to try and figure out any kind of movements for Jenn around that time. So I couldn't say from looking at the data that we do have if Jenn actually did wait somewhere between the school and her mother's office. It's possible, because if Jenn knew that her daughter wasn't coming, and she'd already been to her mother's office and been told it's too early, she wouldn't have got here yet, then perhaps the best option to make it look like she was going back to look for Maddie was to go along the road out of sight of her mother's office and park for a while, so that she could then go back later and say, well, I waited and she didn't come. Just throwing ideas out.
Shouldn't have been driving, like I was swerving.
Makes sense. Did Fox 35 come out to your house, or what was their response?
They responded the following day. I think we did a Zoom video interview.
So she finishes talking about her ugly crying while she was driving and swerving all over the road, and then has a sigh. I honestly believe that she wasn't ugly crying or swerving all over the road, because when have we seen any sign of emotion from Jenn at that level? Even when they put it in her face that her daughter is deceased, they show her the images of her daughter, you don't get that kind of reaction. So I suspect that sigh is signalling that she's lying. And then we get a sigh over the Fox interview. Well, we know that whole interview was just full of deception. Maybe that's what that sigh is about. Who knows?
And it wasn't confirmed to me until the following day, where agents came to the house and we sat in the car for a good amount of time, and I noticed the chair was adjusted. And I said, did you drive my car? And he said, yeah, remember I said I was going out last night to... That's right, you did say that.
Can he tell you where he looked?
I think he said up and down 192, and I said, why there? And he's like, I don't know, I'm just looking. I was just trying to look anywhere. And I'm just like, okay.
Did he say if you found anything or talked to anybody, or just roamed?
Yeah, roamed.
Okay, I think that one's pretty clear. She's doing some serious heavy thinking there, because they've left her hanging. They haven't prompted her for more answers, and she doesn't know where to go with that. So she's, in her mind, trying to process what to say next, while they're patiently sitting there waiting for her to trip up. Now, there's still probably about 10 minutes worth of clips of Jenn with her Soto Sigh, just from this one particular interview where they were just nailing her ass to the wall. And I could go through each one of them individually and point out to you what I think's going on, but I'd actually like to hear your observations on what you think is going on in these clips, or if there's one that particularly stands out to you and what you think is going on. Because I am frequently, I shouldn't say astonished, but I do really enjoy reading the in-depth comments that a lot of people put on here, and I love seeing the amount of thought that people are putting into what they're saying, and people come up with some really great ideas based on what they've seen or what they've heard. So I'm going to just run the last 10 minutes worth of clips through without any narrative from me, because I would really love to see what you guys think of those particular things. So if there's anything that stands out to you, write a comment to me in the comment section. Let me know what you think. I'm more than happy to do a follow-up with that final part of the video with my narrative added in if you wish. Let me know if you do. But I think from what I've already discussed in this video, I think it's probably going to be far more interesting to hear what you guys have got to say. Because some of you may interpret things different from me. Some of you may have better interpretations from me. And I'm really curious to know what you guys think. So before I do play the last lot of clips, I am going to just do the thank yous and everything beforehand. So I definitely want to give a huge shout out to the people who've been doing the Buy Me a Coffee lately. Definitely appreciated, coming up so close to Christmas. Love you guys. But I also want to give a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to me and is continuing to support my channel. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. I'm working towards a new goal, 4,000, 5,000 for subscribers. I don't know if 5,000 is a little bit ambitious, but I would like to try and achieve 4,000 perhaps. Also, please hit the like button. That gets these videos out into the algorithm. And of course, leave a comment. Especially, let me know your thoughts on these clips that are coming up. What's your interpretation of the Soto Sigh in these instances? I'm really looking forward to reading your comments on this and hearing what you think is going on. So thanks, and I will catch you in the next one.
You were telling us that he was trying to log into his emails.
So he's trying to log into his emails on his phone, and I said, two-factor authentication, you can't do anything. You're just gonna have to wait till you get your phone back. What else? And I know at my mom's house, we wouldn't have been welcome. My mom does not like Stefan. She's never liked Stefan. So I knew that our only option was to go to a hotel, but I couldn't afford it. When I came back out, he was asleep. At least I thought he was asleep. But
His dad stay with you guys?
not in the hotel room. He stayed in a different room on the same floor.
Okay. What is like your kind of day to day with her?
I would have said a normal relationship. I asked, she would tell me. I didn't think she was hiding anything from me. I didn't think she was lying to me about anything, but obviously she had secrets. So I had a rule. She wasn't allowed to sleep in his bedroom at all. Like, no sleepovers, no nothing. For a very long time. For years.
Between the Fox 35 story, between your initial statement to the police, a lot of things have changed. The initial statement to the police was you watched her get dressed, you watched her leave, you knew exactly what she was wearing.
Can I tell you my thought process on that, or where I came from with that? I was handed this form, and I'm like, where do I start? What do I write? And somebody said, tell them what you saw. And so I started with, I saw. I promise you, like.
Because you offering him a lawyer is very weird.
I know. That was still me under the assumption that, I think at one point you guys interviewed me, and I don't know theories. I keep hearing
Tell me your theories, because here's the deal. We don't go home until she's found.
No, I know.
So what are your theories?
What I've heard is, what if she upset him and threatened to tell me and say that she was going to tell me, and he needed to shut that down.
Matthew, based on evidence, just in your gut, give me your top 5 places where you think he.
In this area?
Doesn't have to be this area.
No, I know.
Anywhere you want.
I just feel like he had more. There would have been more spots in Northport for her to be dumped. Then the Kissimmee Trail. There's a trail that runs right behind my house that starts right behind my house and goes all the way to that bridge on John Young Parkway that says Kissimmee on it. That whole trail, we've done that as well. That's the only places I could think that like he may have gone, because that's where I know I've gone with him before.
Have you talked to Chris about Stefan needing a lawyer?
Yeah.
When?
I think when you guys showed me the photos. I barely went into the house today, so I don't know what.
I need to know what you think happened.
I think he killed her.
How? You mentioned drugged her, you mentioned other things. Explain your reasoning behind those assumptions and we'll move forward day by day.
So he had access to benzos and I think Lunesta.
What are those? I'm not familiar with that.
Benzodiazepines are anxiety medications which relax you and can make you sleepy.
Okay.
And Lunesta, I think, is a sleeping medication.
What do you think, knowing what you know, he was doing at 192? He was doing here, he was doing here, he was doing in Northport. What do you think?
So him leaving early in the morning and driving around aimlessly somewhere. I feel like he stashed the body at that time.
Which is why I want your assumptions, because you know him, I don't.
Yeah. If I fell asleep at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, at the hotel, what was that, Monday night? Tuesday night?
One of them.
I'm just trying to think, like...
Did he do anything he normally doesn't do within the house around you?
He was acting very normal, sitting on the computer chair, chatting away with me, talking about updating his phone. And then, I don't know if I ever mentioned Lake Lizzie. Not sure.
Do you know if Lake Lizzie was special?
She did enjoy going out there. And it's all really busy till you pass St. Cloud.